going to kick us off. Welcome to the Art of Practice. And we're delighted to have you here today. If you haven't joined us before, or if you don't know who either of us are and what we're doing talking to you today, my name is Lisa Frost, and I am an integral master coach as well as a facilitator on the Integral Life practice platform. I'd love to see you doing some live practice. So please do check the calendar for upcoming events. And you want to tell us about you?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kevin Snorf. I also am an integral master coach and have dabbled in all things integral for almost 2 decades now, and am officially an addict. Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm an integral addict. I also lead some stuff for Integral Life, including a men's group and an Enneagram practice session, which we did today and was focused around the holidays, similar to what we're going to be talking about on this call, but with some different content. So yeah, thrilled to be here today. Please join us over at Integral Life if you want to check out some more content in regards to how to actually integrally live and integrally practice. And having a life of practice is not an easy thing. And that's why we're doing these podcasts, is really taking a closer look at what that takes.
Yep. Yes. Yes. And in fact, we're going to be talking about how to thrive through the holidays today. So hopefully we'll be giving you some good ideas about things that you can do while you face this holiday season, and potentially spend time with family and friends or alone. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. And we do this podcast about once a month. So if you are interested in learning more about practice, about the art of practice, about how to apply, you can catch us monthly on this podcast. Yeah, Kevin, you wanna kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Everything we're about ready to talk about begins with how you immediately perceive the fact that we're about ready to talk about the holidays. Like all the stories that you tell yourself about whether you like the holidays or don't like the holidays, or how the holidays have been in your past, or how you want them or long for them to be in your future, all of that kicks in immediately as soon as we begin to talk about like how to practice through the holidays. So first of all, I would just offer, perhaps pay attention to what you're coming in the door with in terms of your frame of how you see the holidays. I've always looked at it as quite a enjoyable time, as a time of rest, as a time to connect with family. I love my family. I feel very connected to them, and I feel very grateful that I have the relationship that I have with my family and whatnot. So it doesn't feel like too tumultuous for me. It feels like a time that I get to luxuriate. And so that's my backdrop. But most other folks, I'm very, very aware, do not have that same backdrop. and if anything, the holidays is often associated with drama and not so resourceful ways of being. And so that's a part of what we're here to talk about today, is integral as a frame is helping us sort of paint the larger spread of what the human potential looks like, of what we have access to as human beings, both in an interior and an exterior. And so within that frame, there's a lot of potentiality, and there's the sense then of, how do I choose to show up versus going through the motions of day in, day out? Like, how do I choose to show up in what I'm doing? And choice implies some kind of consciousness, some kind of new ways of seeing, perhaps, and new ways of doing. And that often involves practice. And so there's no way to live an integral life, I think we can safely say, without some kind of practice being involved to allow ourselves to consciously show up in some ways, which is going to get to this piece that one of the main pieces we want to talk about today, of conscious versus reactive. Before we do that, anything you want to ping off there, Lisa, or add to?
Yeah, I love that you first of all talked about the backdrop, right? The story that we're telling ourselves about what the holidays mean. And maybe even right now you can reflect on how perhaps that story has changed over the years,
Mhm.
so that you can become aware of how fluid our stories actually can be, even when it feels like they're stuck, or that we're, that we have a particular frame that we use consistently, that actually they change over time. And they can become more entrenched or less entrenched. And just the nature of allowing yourself to reflect on that is in itself a practice.
Mm,
So that was the first thing. So thank you for that. I need a drink of water for 1 second here.
yeah.
The second thing that I loved was well, loved, I don't know, that actually I'm going to retract that, because what I will say is that what I will say is that when we first started talking about doing this particular episode, and you had suggested, why don't we do something around, what it might be like to practice during the holidays. My first thought around that was, what? I have to practice during the holidays now too? Right? Like, the holidays, there's already so much sometimes, whether it's preparing meals and shopping for gifts, or preparing to visit people and actually doing the visiting, the year wrap up for work, and all of the things, right? All the things that we may be involved in, and what this comes to mean to us in this period of time, as well as having to deal with the practicalities of like being out in the world. We're still dealing with COVID. We're still, we're out there, trying to stay healthy and stay well, and deal with crowds of people, and deal with, and all the things that can create some extra stress. And yes, we're gonna talk today about what it might be like to be in a more intentional space while going through and doing all the things that make up the holiday season for you in your life. Oh, I don't hear you anymore.
And that story we can tell ourselves too. We could take a whole, if we had all the time in the world, we could take a whole aqua perspective on that, where it's like, oh, my super green parts don't like all the orange consumerism stuff that comes up around the holidays, and it's just corporate greed, and it's like, okay, true, but partial. That there's also an element of uh, going further back into some of the other levels of development. It was a time of rejuvenation. It was a time of reconnecting with the deeper resourcefulness in ourselves, because it was dark all the time, And so there's multiple interpretations, of course, that are available to us in terms of how we hold all of this. And all of them have partiality to them, and all of them have a dose of truth to them. And so it's all valid. And at the end of the day, this piece that we're really wanting to kick off with here is something that we both use in a lot of leadership coaching is, am I coming from a place of reactivity, or am I coming from a place of conscious choice? And so this juxtaposition of like, basically all practice comes down to a choice to be more conscious and deliberate about how I'm showing up in the world. And isn't that a great thing? Isn't that what we're all striving for? We all have this sense of some incongruence. That's not quite the person I want to be. I want to try harder. I want to work at this more. I want to push myself to grow, to really live in alignment with how I see myself. And that could be, the backdrop of that could be aqua. The backdrop of that could be more intuitive or instinctual and less conceptual. There's a lot of places in which that comes in, but it all comes down to this element of am I just going through the motions and sleepwalking through life and kind of bumping around like a pinball off of whatever's happening? And that's the reactive side of things. Or am I in consciousness? Am I choosing consciously how I want to live? And so, especially when it comes to the holidays, it's helpful to step back a little bit and go, before I enter into the holidays, before I step into the mosh pit of my family or whatever whatever it is, what do I need to consciously keep an eye out for, and how do I want to attend to that potentially in a different way that feels more aligned with the person I want to be,
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we should dive into a bit of, what we mean by conscious and reactive. We all might have an idea of what that means for us, but there are probably some specific ways that we can orient around conscious and reactive, what it looks like, and what we might want to be um, looking out for while we move through this period of time. Um, I remember when we were first talking about doing this session, Kevin, one of the brought forward that I'm just going to bring up right now is this idea of erring on the side of listening, curiosity, and openness. Um, and yeah, I guess I think that it might be nice to give some examples of what that could look like in a variety of situations. Does anything come to mind immediately for you?
I see you're gonna put me on the spot and do some practice design live here. I see. Yeah, I could probably pull that out of a hat. Let me see. So maybe start with what it doesn't look like in more archetypal form. Deciding to bring up the topic of politics at the Christmas dinner table. That seems like a very reactive approach, and when we've seen it, whether it's in a Hallmark Christmas movie or whether it's in a more popular media, or when it's happened in our own household. And so if we err on the side of listening, curiosity, and openness because we're trying to become more second tier, or we're actively working our second tier muscles, would be another way of saying it, then that it's like, well, lots of perspectives are welcome. I don't need to react. I love that. Tell me more about what you have to say about that. Where'd you hear about that? Might as well check their sources along the way. What's meaningful about that for you? Imagine a dinner time conversation that's based around that versus based around you needing to defend yourself or you needing to make a point. Another one that might happen is, let's say it's New Year's or something, overeating, over drinking, over imbibing in certain substances that recently became legal in Colorado. I don't know. There's there can be a sense there of just trying to get away from it all through eating, through substance change, versus, oh, I've really had a lot of trouble with sleep in 2022, and one of the things I've been really working on is trying to work on an evening ritual that winds me down in such a way that I get better sleep. Maybe I'm not going to party this year. Maybe I'm not going to go crazy. To be clear, also, I don't feel like the crowd we have at Integral Life is the major party crowd, but I'm trying to come up with examples of those around us. Where it's like, maybe I go to bed early and wake up to start my new year in the way that I'd like to be living my new year, more consciously, more of a sense of diligent and deliberate practice for how I want to be. So, those are examples. And that can also be about how we relate to other people, like Uncle so-and-so's drinking too much again.
Mm.
instead of berating him, maybe he needs an ear. Maybe he needs a shoulder to cry on. Maybe I take him outside and get him away from everybody and have a drink with him, so that I'm sort of sheltering other people from from the calamity that is Uncle Joe, and instead, I'm having a good catch up with him or something like that. I don't know what it looks like. It's very personalized, but this idea of erring on the side of listening more, being more curious, more openness, in the power of a pause like that, in the power, it adds space to be more conscious about how you're choosing to show up, versus saying something you're going to regret, versus eating too much or drinking too much, versus overbuying gifts as a way of showing your love, and people don't actually appreciate them.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, what strikes me about that is I love that you've talked about it in terms of how we relate to others, the interpersonal domain. I think that there's also a way that you were also speaking into what it looks like to be listening to ourselves, and in particular when you were talking about being intentional about how we want to show up. So making a decision, right, of deciding, like, do I want to move through the holidays? How do I want to be showing up? Who do I want to be in the context of the holiday season? And what does that actually mean to me? And then in any given context, am I doing that? Like, am I doing it? And not from a place of to judge you, right? Not from a place of trying to find where you know you're not rising up to your standards, or you're not walking your talk, or you're not practicing what you preach, right? Or whatever else, however else the internal dialogue might show up. But actually being curious as to what might be happening in the moment where you find that you are not showing up as intentionally as you would like to be, and extend that openness and even compassion to yourself as you come across these moments that we're all human, we all fall down, and to allow yourself to have that moment of being human and to be honest with yourself about it without judging, to
Totally.
be that place of listening and curiosity. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that this can look really different who it is who's listening to this right now. But some other ways that this might show up is are things like scrambling behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? So trying to compact too much to your time and feeling like you have to really scramble,
Mm-hmm.
that actually can create sort of a cascading effect of not being intentional, because suddenly you don't have time to do this and that. I actually ran into that this morning. I had a certain amount of time for getting ready, and then I spilled my coffee all over the carpet.
Mm.
Right? So unexpected life events. And my response to that was not intentional. My response to that
Yeah.
was highly reactive,
Mm-hmm.
given that I didn't really have enough time to be able to absorb a life event in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I had a human event, I had a
Yeah.
human moment. And
Well,
I
let,
had
let me let me plug in that too. Some You can't actually be conscious sometimes without the reactive. Like, this idea that somehow we're gonna all become like Shaolin monks, or perfect little fairy dancers off in the woods taking care of the planet. It's not grounded. This life by itself is made up of chaos. You're not going to avoid that in moments. And so it's like, oh, I spilled the coffee. Oh, I'm in reactive. Wait a minute. How is this how I want to be?
Mm.
And there's, let's just say there's going to be plenty of moments over the holidays where there's opportunities to become self-aware that I am reactive. And then it's a great moment to go, oh, interesting. I do have a choice. I can be conscious here. What can I do? And so oftentimes, like, I have a thing where, because I'm very, what's the word? I keep wanting to say clutter, but that's not, I'm prone to accidents, let's say, lots of accidents, whether it's spilling the coffee or dropping a plate or kicking my toe on something. I do that a lot. And I used to beat myself up about it a lot. And now I'm doing more of a practice of like, oh, hey, reactive moment. How do you want to be? It's
Mhm.
just a stub toe, like
Mhm.
moving right along, like take a breath, relax. And then I get to drop more into the conscious choice of who I'm practicing.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Sorry to
really appreciate.
interject, but yeah.
No, I really appreciate that, because what you're getting at is that this thing called, oh, I'm reactive, the noticing, I'm reactive
Mm-hmm.
right now in this moment, and using that as an opportunity to come back to an awareness of how you want to be,
Yeah.
is a beautiful and simple practice to be in.
Yeah.
And even if that is the only kind of practice that you take up during this period of time, it is a worthwhile and beautiful practice. I mean, one could say that one could say that you could just do that practice
Yeah. Yeah.
and all the time, and it would be enough. It would be
Es-
enough to really make a change in your world.
Essentially, it's mindfulness 101.
Yeah.
you know that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And just in a different frame of reactive versus conscious, and getting back to choice, getting back to mindfulness. We'll probably, I feel like we're going to say this like every call that, or every time we do this art of practice. But one of our mutual mentors in the Integral Coaching Canada world, Joanne Hunt, has this great quote that the mother of all practices is coming back to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And if the larger meta practice is just to be more conscious versus reactive, we just described how to live the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a particular grace of that sort of meta practice. Because again, I'm going to come back to this whole thing. Like, we tend, as human beings, we tend to notice that we are not showing up the way that we want to show up, and
Mm-hmm.
immediately go into self-criticism about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those in my practices have heard me say this who knows how many times, but that is sort of the double cut of falling asleep in that moment. It's
Yeah.
like, it's a time waster. It can actually create more inner reactivity, and it keeps you stuck in where you are. So that graceful move of, oh, look, it's essentially this: I've gone off course, let me
Mm-hmm.
I've gone off course, let me course correct.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other side of that too, just to be clear, is like when we say err on the side of listening, curiosity, and openness, and being more conscious and being more present, the other extreme of that is don't go pull out your meditation cushion and go sit by the meditation tree, because you just don't want to deal with the drama, and
Mhm.
you're just going to rest in ever present, always already consciousness.
Hey,
It's
David,
like,
that actually sounds like a good strategy.
for some, perhaps, and for other integral life types that we know about, who would just rather do that all day,
Yeah.
that is in itself is the reaction
Yeah.
to avoiding a certain kind of drama that life is asking of us to participate in, consciously. And so instead of trying to opt out and spiritually bypass, like, for those folks who are more backwards, what's the what's the forwards conscious move, but not too far forwards, you know?
Michael Singer has a quote that I really appreciate around this, and that is the question of what is life asking of me right now? What is
Hmm.
life asking of me right now? And sometimes just by nature of what's happening, it's best to pull yourself away for a little break so that you can reset. But I love that you just really named this whole thing called spiritual bypass, and the ways in which we might be tempted when things are, disorganized and it feels a little edgy or difficult to handle. We might be tempted to actually withdraw from life, withdraw
Yeah.
from what's in front of us. And, again, talking about this whole idea of these meta practices, it's like being in life is the practice, guys.
Yeah.
Being
Yeah.
in life is the practice. And being as intentional as possible in life, right, is
Yeah.
the practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Another one that occurred to me as you were talking that annoys me and I, have to work with when it shows up when I'm at family gatherings, holiday parties, anything like that, is when people get too micromanagey about how everything is going. And so if you're one of those people, that's a good thing to react to, is like, are you trying to just keep the peace, or are you trying to make sure everything goes perfect, or what's the reactiveness that you're hedging against in that place? And then also, like from my perspective, I'm like, it's a holiday, let's put our feet up and take a breath and relax and enjoy this beautiful day, kind of thing. And then if I'm feeling micromanaged, I'm like, uh, I can only think of a way to say this involves lots of swear words, but get away from me, like get out of my space, kind of thing, you know. And so then that's my reaction. And so sometimes I've often had I had a past partner one time like we were visiting my mom, and she's like, I think life would be a lot easier for you if you just let your mom be a mom.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh snap. And so
Mm.
now when I go to see my mom, she's going to do all the mom things that annoy me, and I'm an independent man, I can take care of myself now, I don't need you to be a mom. And then it's just like, what am I trying to prove here? I've
Yeah.
already proved that to myself. She doesn't need to know that. She just wants to be a mom. It's okay to let her be a mom. And so I do, in ways, or at least I try to. you know and I think especially with family members, that's a big one to consider practicing, is as soon as you start setting up an expectation that to have a good life or a spiritual life or a happy life or a happy holidays or whatever it is that is contingent upon everybody else being like you need to be them, you are in for a big disappointment.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that you can practice erring on the side of listening, curiosity, and openness, and not needing to change other people, but needing to change my response. What is life asking of me? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yeah. What is life asking of me in this moment? I'm the one who's supposedly practicing being so awkward and second tier and agile. So how, like, to quote the Taylor Swift song that's all over the radio right now, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Wait, is that what she means by that?
I don't know, and I don't think so, but that's how I'm going with it.
Yeah,
That's the story I'm telling myself, is that
love
she's like super conscious, non-reactive.
it.
She's our Buddha.
Nice. And to kind of just tail off of what you said there, it's not just about not changing the other people, it's also not about changing the circumstance,
Yeah.
right? Like there's this way in which it's so tempting to try um, and change what's happening, or change how the people are responding, or try and orchestrate things to make ourselves feel more comfortable. And natural tendency to want to do that. And all that's happening is we are actually in that moment struggling against our own discomfort with how life is showing up. That's all that's happening. We're struggling with
Yep.
our own discomfort. And so noticing that, listening and being curious and being more open. The other thing that you said kind of pinged for me was this whole idea of trying, right? Trying.
Yeah.
I
Do or
find
do not, Yoda says.
yeah, yeah. And I find that when I am in that place of trying, like I'm trying to do, I'm trying to be more something, I'm trying to, get my point across, I'm trying to, um, whatever it is, that when I'm in that place of that trying energy, it's actually a contracted energy. It's not an open energy.
Hmm.
It's me trying to create a particular act, or to, again, to sort of manipulate the situation or anyone in the situation to to go a particular direction or to end up in a particular way.
Yeah.
And so watch for that energy. It's like, am I trying to do something here? Am I trying other than what life is asking of me? Is there some trying energy that is present?
That's interesting too. And I'm gonna take a slightly contrarian perspective on that will end up integral probably, but there's this interesting dynamic of practice where, you know, some practice is really the wisdom of allowing and surrendering and letting go and allowing what's present to emerge, and other aspects of practice have a more of a capability building
Mhm.
sense to them, in which effort needs to be applied. It's not comfortable and I have to make this new move, and much like lifting weights at the gym, it's going to burn a little bit, but it's going to build muscle and that feels good. I think really it's a both and it, when I heard you saying, commenting on the trying, I'm like, oh, she's speaking to me right now because I'm always efforting, I'm always trying too hard, I'm always pushing the envelope and trying to build muscle as hard as I can and lift as much weight as I can, because that's my way. I love that about practice, and I've learned and I've grown so much through doing that. And a lot of my development really, though, is around letting go of trying and the wisdom of allowing. That's what actually gets me more mileage in this day and age than being the young buck that I used to be, and so similarly, I think for other people who are all about the wisdom of allowing so much, that are just like, this is an extreme sort of green example, but I'll just wait here until the universe is ready to provide me with whatever it is. And it's like, have you tried trying? On the opposite side of things. So,
Yeah.
and maybe trying's not the right word, but I think it's a combination of both. One of the things that every time I've had a private with my meditation teacher, Lama Surya Das, I don't know if he knows that he said this or not, but every single time that I have had a private with him, he's always said to me, strive contentedly, not graspingly.
That's the essence of it.
That's
That's
it.
the essence
Yeah.
of it. Yes. Because the nature of trying in that contracted state is that striving,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a yeah, I think this is a really interesting sort of point, because I get what you're saying about, yes, sometimes that there needs to be an energetic action
Yeah.
taken. There needs to be energy applied. This is the masculine move, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
the allowing is more of the
Agency.
feminine
Yeah.
dynamic. And yet, um, if we're, for instance, if you are lifting weights from a contracted state,
Yeah.
you're likely to be injured.
Yeah. Totally.
You actually have to be lifting weights from a relaxed state, not a like dead relaxed state, but
No,
there's
but
a relaxed state that
yeah.
is part of that, is an action oriented relaxed state that you're lifting from. And that's the essence of the difference of what I was talking about in terms of this, sort of trying energy. And for me, trying energy can also be like trying to layer something on top of, like, I'm going to try and be happy right now, even though I'm pissed.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So there's
Yeah.
like this layering on top of what is true and real with some way that we are trying to change it.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the more Aikido move of like going with the energy that is already here and using it to shift things.
Yeah. And back to the holidays, I think that erring on the side of the allowing part of it is really important, because you're not going to change Uncle Joe or whoever it is, in with a couple of snide comments or something like that. And so to the extent that you're overly focused on trying to change someone else to make the atmosphere right for you, not only is that about you and not them, but you have to be incredibly skillful to be able to flip that situation in such a small moment. And most people won't even do that or be able to do that in such a small time frame. It's not your place. That's not what the holidays are about. It's about coming together. And so how can you just allow people to be as they are and not need to change them as much, and then watch your own reactivity around all of that, and then go, great, how do I want to show up consciously around that?
Yep. Yeah, nicely said. Nicely said.
Where do we want to go? In our notes that we had talked about, a couple of things we wanted to talk about. We could chat a little bit about like some of these examples of what reactive to conscious could look like, or we could also talk a little bit about some of the aqua preferences around this. What's your sense of what would be a good place to dive in here a little bit more with the time we have?
Yeah, I think that the aqua preferences might be really interesting for
Mm.
our audience, what that might look like. And I also want to open it up to anybody who has a
Oh yeah,
question.
good point.
So if you do have a question, you can raise your hand and we can see about answering it as it sort of fits into this. But do you want to kick us off on the aqua preferences?
Yeah, just check real quick. Anybody want to jump in right here with a clarification, an observation, a question? Give us something to bounce off. It's fine if not. Good old Phyllis got something to say. I always love to hear from Phyllis.
Let's allow you to talk. All right, Phyllis, you're up.
Are you being sarcastic, Kevin?
Never. I love it. Every time Phyllis comes to one of my sessions, I say, oh my gosh, Phyllis is in the waiting room. Let's get her in here. I adore Phyllis.
Thank you, Dora. I asked for that. Thank you. I used to be a speech language pathologist, so I work with people with language disorders, adults mostly with language disorders and swallowing disorders. And therapy practice, the way that I used to talk about it to them was you practice, 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 practice. And then when you're in the moment of either interacting with somebody, if it's a language issue, or if you're in the moment where you're eating a meal, you do sort of preparatory practice, where you get yourself set up for the situation that you're about to enter. And so when you enter it, you can kind of let it go. And you can, you have that sort of, at the tip of your fingers when you need it, because you've just practiced it. But in that moment, you can be present to the people that you're with, really present to the people that you're with. And I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm actually curious, Phyllis, as you just reflect on some of the things that'll be happening for the holiday season, what is a preparatory practice that you do in your life?
See, I knew that I was. She does that, doesn't she, Kevin?
She sure does. Not just to you, to me too.
I think For me, a lot of it has to do with reminding myself that I'm more interested in what they have to say than
Mm,
I am in what I have to say to them.
nice.
Mm. Mm.
That's a great way of capturing it.
I want to build on that for just 1 second,
Yeah.
because I was in a coaching session today with someone who gave me a great little acronym, which was WAIT, WAIT, and it was, why am I talking? It totally reminded me of that. But I love that, Phyllis. I think that that's beautiful. I think that that's a lovely preparatory practice. And I think that, for some of our audience that meditation, obviously, if you have a strong meditation practice, that can go a long way toward preparing for anything that you're going to be doing. I think one of the key things here is to stay on the practices that you have, right? So again, it can
That's great.
sometimes feel like during the holiday season, it's like, oh yeah, I'm eating a lot of sugar, and I'm, maybe not exercising, and I'm not doing the things that actually keep me from being reactive in my normal day-to-day activities. And then we're compiling that with the stress that may be happening as a result of being in the holidays and having our schedules disrupted, and conversations that can sometimes be tricky, or whatever else. So what are the practices that you're doing in your own life? And I'm just speaking to the audience out there. It's like, what are the practices in your own life that are actually really important practices for
Yeah.
you to continue doing during the holiday season, so that you can feel prepared to face whatever life is putting in front of you?
Yeah. Like, to Phyllis's point, like I notice for myself, if for like I sit almost every day first thing in the morning, but if I don't, or I miss a day, I can't believe how much calamity ensues.
Mm.
And I often will skip days on purpose to practice being with calamity, which is challenging. But if you know you're going into a hot zone, use all the practices you got to set yourself up for success, or not necessarily success isn't the right word, but for being resourced, So that's a big one. Sometimes, Phyllis, when my wife and I are driving to visit family, or when we're going to like a mixer or a party or a networking event, we will actually have a conversation around, how do we want to be in this going in? What kind of triggers do we need to watch out for? How are we going to work with them if they come up? And we'll kind of walk through historical events of how that happened and what helped. And I find that really useful. Like while we're driving, we use the time to do that. And I really like that. The only other thing I would say, Phyllis, is that I think there's a spectrum in practice in general of people who like a lot of preparation around practice and how they're going to show up, even to the extent of over-indexing on practice and preparation as a way of supporting them. And then on the other side, there's practices that are more instinctual and in the moment. And so it's a good thing to keep an eye on there too. Am I using preparation to hedge against something? And would it be good to practice more instinctualness? Or am I using instinctualness and just being in the moment and saying whatever comes up? And that's really my reactive side, and conscious would be being more prepared. In general, though, given the number of people who tends to prepare for things, I kind of suggest people err on the side of preparation because it has preparation has the quality of being more conscious, like it's pre-planning is more deliberate. So
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. You want to some of the aqua preferences?
yeah, so kind of similar, like this this aspect that I was just talking about in regards to preparation on one side and instinctual on one side of a polarity, on the other side of the polarity, there can be this when you're looking inside of a lot of the aqual, there's a lot of it is set up around polarities, individual versus collective, interior versus exterior in the quadrants, let's say. And so if you tend to prefer being in a certain quadrant or another quadrant, like if you tend to prefer just being in your own upper left experience of what's going on all the time, and you feel it an impingement to come out of that, you could, number one, you could have just a practice around allowing yourself to just be in your upper left and notice that as a preference. Or you could have a practice for yourself of leaning in to what would happen if I put myself out more. What would happen if I spoke up more than I usually do in family gatherings and offered something into the space? Similarly, if your preference might be the lower left and you need to ping off of everybody there and make sure you're a social butterfly and, talk to every single person at the holiday party, maybe there's an edge around really dropping in with 2 or 3 people that you want to intentionally give more time and space because they have more meaning or connection for you. That could be a nice sort of deliberate, conscious practice versus being, trying to pollinate every flower in the whole party. Perhaps the wrong metaphor there. On the right hand side of things, like my preference is always upper right when I arrive for Christmas. It's like, what needs doing? What can we get done? How can I be in action? How can I be in my body? How can we set up the space optimally? Like I'm always asking, how can I help? And so the last couple of holidays, I've gone and put my feet up and I just sit there and I feel so guilty and so restless. But then I kind of drop in and I'm like, oh, nice. There's a little bit of relaxation. And somebody's like, can you help? And I'm like, no, I'm relaxing. And I'm like, yeah, no, I need to help. My wife is super low right and just wants all the T's crossed and I's dotted and everything set up perfectly and stuff like that. And so, I'll often challenge her, can you let me and others do some of that too and actually engage socially? So it's a sense of like, we all have go-to places that we prefer in our aqua constellation. And if I'm mindful of that, if I'm really self-observing where I tend to go, or I'm doing some, thanks to Phyllis's suggestion today, I've done some pre-planning for this and I've thought it through, what might be my aqua preferences. And then how do I want to show up? What quadrants do I want to consciously engage in that I might not normally? That would just be my cursory thoughts on quadrants. And anything to add there, Lisa? Or
Yeah. I actually see them as sort of two movements, and I think you said this at the beginning. It's like one movement would just be simply to watch your preferences. So if this feels, if you're listening to this and it feels like this would feel like so much to try and be handling in the midst of everything else that's going on, then just be aware. Just be aware of where your preferences lie and how you're showing up in your preferences. If, on the other hand, you want to take on something new and lean more into a different way of being, for sure, I love the idea of leaning into a different quadrant. I think that this is also possible with states. We all have states.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there. It's also possible with what?
States.
Oh, states.
So,
yeah.
So
That's
so
a great
we all,
point.
yeah, we we each have sort of a tendency to stick in particular states sometimes, and I would liken it to like a set point.
Mm-hmm.
So our set point may be on the more melancholy side as a natural. Our
Mhm.
set point might be on the more excited side as a natural. And to be aware of sort of what states we are tending to hang out in. Uh, and interestingly, in the holidays, we might hang out in slightly different states than what we normally do. But noticing what states we're hanging out in,
Yeah.
and then potentially allowing ourselves to lean into some other states that are not our normal set point.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you captured this piece too of like, we can't talk about practices ever without also talking about scale.
Mm.
And, like, what's the right amount of scale of a practice such that we're not setting ourselves up for disappointment of like, oh, I can't do that practice, but we're asking ourselves to lift 300 pounds and we can't normally on a good day lift 50, you know?
Right.
So I think for most people, just self-observation, self-awareness of where I tend to go is a good scale to pay attention to. It's a nice starting point that isn't too aggressive or over the top. And then maybe there's another move on top of that called, let me try something different and new. Once I'm self-aware, once I've self-observed my tendencies, maybe I'll get outside my comfort zone and try something different.
Mm.
So there's that. And then there's the deep end of the pool. And that's when you come and hire Lisa and I as coaches. and we really teach you how to scuba dive in a whirlpool.
That's an interesting metaphor there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one deep end of the pool practice that I end up giving to most of my clients is being more self-compassionate with yourself, because we do all make mistakes. We all are reactive. We do. And if this sounds like a broken record to you, all the more reason to pay attention to it. It's like, it's some of us, like myself, are so good at being so compassionate with their clients, and then I just beat the crap out of myself at the end of the day before I'm going to bed, and it's like, that's incongruent. I have to be able to practice what I'm telling other people to practice and what I'm offering other people in the same way I offer it to myself. And so just know that the holidays are a volatile time, and if you can't extend a sense of self-compassion to yourself, which is tricky and hard sometimes and challenging, it does feel like the deep end of the pool, just to grant yourself self-love in any kind of way, then then try that on, see how it fits. One of the ways I think about it for myself is I don't call it self-compassion and self-love, I call it self-acknowledgement and self-appreciation.
Mm.
What can I appreciate about myself? What can I acknowledge about how I'm doing my best to show up around, and that, for whatever reason, that change of language really helps me kind of find a way in versus, I get a little sick to my stomach with the word self-love, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's sort of the way that I put it is true self-acceptance, right? Actually, I think self-love can be a hard concept, and it kind of crashes against ideas that we have about narcissism and
Mm-hmm.
whatever else. And so thinking about it as true self-acceptance, accepting ourselves all the way down.
Yeah.
uh, and I think that's a nice way of holding it. And yeah, the really, to the extent that we are finding with being compassionate with others, that is pointing us to the fact that there's some probably self-compassion work that needs to happen, because it's
Yeah.
hard to extend that to others if we haven't developed the muscle
Yeah,
of giving ourselves that same acceptance and grace. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so I don't know. Hopefully that's some helpful tips, suggestions, ideas. Just a quick recap of things like really this idea of reactive to conscious is at the core of what we're of all practice in general, and especially knowing that the holidays can be a more reactive time around family and situations. It's like, great, do some preparation, do some forethought into and foresight into like how do I consciously want to show up, how can I keep an eye and be more self-aware of reactivity when it shows up, how can I know that it's probably there's going to be calamity, and therefore also be self-compassionate with myself. That sets up a nice little toolkit for yourself, just to have some more general cool tools without getting too specific into each person's world. But you guys know, if you're listening to this, you know yourself better than anyone else, so you have an idea of what to keep an eye on and also what to move towards if that's in your capacity to do so.
Yeah, and this thing called erring on the side of listening, curiosity, and openness,
Yeah,
as sort of the baseline practice for how you are being in that entity, that conscious move. And again, self-observation, observing how you're showing up in any given context. This is one of the master practices. So if nothing else, this holiday season, allow yourself the gift of just seeing without judging how you're responding, how you're showing up, and that can actually help you understand where your next growth edge is,
yeah,
and how you'd like to be more intentional in the coming year.
yeah. And I also, a lot of this is about integral, which is not just all quadrants, but it's a second tier approach to things. And if you're not developing openness to all the perspectives that are out there, whether you like them or not, it's very hard to move into second tier approaches and second tier, more than just thinking, but engagement in the world, which is what the world needs right now. And so this little microcosm of how you show up in holding perspectives in yourself and others just around the holidays has a bigger splash, let's call it, into what we're all trying to build in integral, which is more adeptness at being able to hold all the different perspectives that are out there right now, which is, it's frankly dizzying. And so what a great opportunity to practice.
Yeah, and just very quickly on that
Yeah,
note, the the difference here at second tier is not just about being able to tolerate other
yeah,
perspectives.
yeah.
It's being able to honor, respect, and value them,
Yep.
and to
And
find
even work
them,
inside them,
and even work inside them, and to
Yep.
find them within you. And so that's really, when we talk about what the breakthrough move from green to, that is the breakthrough move.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, I need to wrap up here at the top of the hour, and but this is, as always, absolutely lovely talking with you, Lisa. Always love our chats. Thank you to Phyllis, Rashana, and Alex for being on the call live to plug in. A few folks on YouTube, hopefully too, and please keep tuning in for these, bringing your ideas of what you guys want and what you are interested in. And please consider, if you're not already, jumping into some of our sessions in Integral Life and checking all the resources and practices available there. What am I missing, Lisa?
Yeah, and if you aren't already an Integral Life member, I want to just really invite you to take Integral Life up on the membership. What am I trying to say? I think that they offer, there's like a dollar for a month or something. But there's an opportunity for you to join, to try it out, a trial basis. And you'll be able to drop into live practice sessions with that trial membership, where you can experience what it's like to practice in a room of other practitioners, other people just like you, who are really wanting to embody some of these principles and to be able to talk about what they are learning and what's changing and shifting for them. So please do come and join us. Check it out. See what you think about it, because there's some really great practices on our practice platform, along with all of the wonderful content that Integral Life offers to both members and non-members alike.
And of course, I think a good way to wrap this up is just to wish everyone a happy holidays, emphasis on happy, or perhaps we should say conscious holidays. We'll look forward to seeing you guys in the new year on our next Art of Practice in January. And such a blessing to be able to be here and to have folks tuning in and working with their own practices. So my best to everyone, and especially you, Lisa.
Yeah, you as well. And Kevin, if people want to get in touch with you, how might they find you?
They can find me at kevinsnorf.com, SNORF.com, and or check out Integral Life and come to one of my sessions on the Enneagram or the men's group, and come play ball.
Yep, great. And if you're interested in getting in touch with me, you can find me at yourdeepestesyes.com, yourdeepestesyes.com. You can reach out to me on that website. And yeah, I run a women's group and a variety of other sessions designed to help you awaken to who you actually are, and to practice in that space. So would love to see you. Thank you, Kevin, for doing this. I so appreciate our dynamic, and I love having opportunities for us to come together and to share these ideas with each other. So happy holidays, everybody. Take good care, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.